All right, well, I got all of the wires, tied up and kind of held in place. Got the battery tied down. Got, I think, pretty much everything. I checked all my bolts, made sure everything was tight. I'm sure I'm missing something, but I put the seats in here, so I think it's time for a first drive. My gauges are all wired up, so I can keep an eye on, water temp and oil temp, or oil pressure anyway. But I'm just gonna go for a quick spin around the block anyway, so I'm not even gonna get it up to temperature or anything. All right, that went pretty good. I'm really happy to see that the transmission worked, the clutch worked. These were all pieces that I bought used, and I had no idea if they would work or not. I mean, I had a pretty good idea, the transmission was okay, because I did, put it in gear and all of that, but you never know until you actually go. So I think we're in pretty good shape. There is a pretty serious whistling coming from this throttle body here, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. My first thought would be a vacuum leak or something, but there aren't really many vacuum lines here. There's one here which is running the computer, and then there's the brake booster one, and that's pretty much it. There's no leaks there. I did install the gasket between the throttle body and the intake manifold, so I don't think that's it either. I did check on BBK's website about whistling throttle bodies, or I actually just Googled whistling throttle body BBK, and on their own website, and their frequently asked questions, this was one of them, like, why is my new throttle body whistling? And they said that some of the edges in there could be really, really sharp, and that air moving past it quickly can cause that whistling noise, and that particularly the idle air control valve one, because there is a hole right on the inside of that guy. So they said that the solution to that would be to like sand it down, or even like Dremel the hard edge off of that and maybe like make it a little bit rounder, which is kind of weird. You'd expect them to do that, make sure to do that as part of the manufacturing process, but I don't know, maybe they miss some, or maybe they just don't bother to do it, and who knows. So I'm gonna try that. It doesn't really seem like that can do much harm, and I do have my like little Dremel tool I can do that with. Aha. Well, it's a lot better. I went ahead and I got this really rounded off here, and there is still a little bit of a whistle. I think I maybe took care of 80% of it, and I was wondering if the butterfly valve itself, which doesn't feel very sharp, but could be causing the issue. But I feel like they could have just maybe machined it a little bit smoother. I mean, it was their own website that suggested taking a Dremel to your brand new throttle body, which is something you don't want to do. Throw a bunch of metal shavings right into where your intake is. Whatever. But at least it's fixed now, so. All right, I think today I want to start rebuilding this interior. So I think the first step is to kind of get the floor, the sound deadening and the floor insulation, whatever, all put back in, and new stuff put over the transmission tunnel. And I also am going to put this, it's kind of like a third shift boot, like an inner shift boot here. That small shift boot is really meant just for the the shifter unit itself, but there's still air gaps into the bottom of the car, and heat and possible water or dust or whatever is going to be able to come up through there. So I bought this shift boot here. It's like a rubber shift boot from a Jeep Wrangler, and it fits perfectly. And actually this ring right here is kind of like a metal ring, so I can form it to the car. So I'm just going to go ahead and drill it in there and call it good. All right, there we go. Just put 4 bolts through this thing. I was able to hammer down all the edges here to kind of seal it to the transmission tunnel. Actually, this works pretty good. It actually maybe could even work as a shift boot. There was actually a nice kind of circle sort of lip here, but I want to go ahead and use the leather shift boot. But yeah, there you have it. Whew, all right, there you go. I've got this plate cut out. This took me just hours and hours and hours to cut, and then I just kind of grinded it down because it has to fit this template perfectly, so I kept cutting and carving until I finally got it close enough anyway. I mean, it fits very, very well, so awesome. I'm really glad to have this done. This was definitely the most tedious thing I've done on this car so far. And grinding aluminum is kind of not really that pleasant. So the last thing I have to do is just sand it down and make all of the edges as smooth as possible. And then of course paint it black. And while I was at it too, I made a, the transmission sort of clutch inspection area. Cool. All right. Well, that should be all of my aluminum cutting for now anyway. I'm sure there's going to be something that comes up, but all right, let's get this thing all cleaned up. All right, I almost forgot to cut the hole out for the shifter here. So I went ahead and just kind of eyeballed it and took some measurements and cut a hole out, and it looks good. So before I paint, actually, there's 2 things. And I will say that I kind of crossed my mind just to leave it this I guess brushed aluminum, which kind of has a cool look, but it's very reflective. So I am going to go ahead and just paint it black. And the black will kind of hide the imperfections, this part right here where it kind of swoops in a little too much. And then I also have to drill a hole for my line lock. This one's going to be my line lock button here. So inside this console, I have a little sort of button to arm it, and then that'll light up red when it's armed. And then this ring here also will light up red so that I know that the line lock is active. And this is just a momentary switch, so I hold it and line lock is engaged, and I let it go, and line lock is released. So, oh, and I also went ahead and added a cigarette lighter in here. We gotta clean that guy up. Just like a 12-volt socket for my phone charger or whatever. But yeah, I'm just gonna place this guy, I think somewhere about there, so that I can kind of push the button and then reach back up to my shifter quickly, so that'll go somewhere right about there. And I guess now's the time to kind of start thinking about this shift boot. I think it's going to be pretty easy. All I have to do is I'm going to remove this plastic clip and kind of just put that, I guess, on the underside or something. Yeah, I guess I'll just put it on the underside and maybe somehow clamp it to this guy, maybe with some bolts. All right, so I finished cutting and painting this center console plate, and it definitely has sort of like a handmade quality to it. So it's a little rough around the edges, and some of the cuts aren't exactly straight. But inside, cars are very dark in the inside, so maybe it won't be so noticeable. And it's kind of it's sort of my first pass at this, so maybe one day down the road I can try and remake this thing a little bit more precise. But the important part is that this fits perfectly my shift boot and my shifter. So what I did was I made this ring out of steel here. I just kind of cut it out to shape, and then this will fit on the underside of this thing, which will kind of clamp down this shift boot here. And this shift boot, by the way, it's a leather shift boot from from the 2015 Challenger, the one that I pulled off that shifter that kind of came with my transmission. So it was actually kind of a good luck, because this thing really will fit pretty well, and I think it's kind of cool to have like a new Challenger shift boot on an old Challenger. I don't know, if I'm gonna use a shift boot, it might as well be from a Dodge, and it actually matches my seats like perfectly. All right, there we go. I have a console. It's definitely got a sort of rugged, like handmade, quality to it. But once the seats are in here, it's gonna kind of hide it, and it'll sort of blend in a little bit. But I mean, it looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. Certainly this is something down the road, I can improve, or maybe try and rebuild another one or something. But for now, I think this thing looks awesome. And the coolest part, line lock armed. You can hear the line lock firing. Look at that thing. That's pretty sweet.